Hey, how's it going, guys? This is your boy Hayes, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about Wrath PvP Classic Prepatch, and I'm going to be discussing my build and what I'm doing currently with Frost DK. Now, there's a lot of variations you could actually play that are considered viable, but specifically for Frost, I'm going to go ahead and share with you guys what I currently like to play. And honestly, if you want to blow people up in 3 seconds, it's probably what you're looking for. So let's go ahead and jump into this video. I'll quickly explain talents and why we're going into those talents. And later on talk about, I guess, why we're playing this spec over a different one that I would probably enjoy playing a little more. But, you know, it'll come in the future once we obtain a couple more glyphs and maybe some level increases. So let's go ahead and jump into this video and talk about it. So let's go ahead and explain the rhino in the room. Whether or not you want to use two-hander, whether you want to use dual wield. Now, both of them I would consider are fairly viable, but as right now, because Obliterate is missing some important things like 20% glyph damage that's going to be coming up in Wrath, it is a bit weaker in the pre-patch than it should be in comparison to, let's say, dual wield. Now, right now, Howling Blast and Frost Strike both hit harder than Obliterate does. Now, you also amplify that in the fact you got two weapons, you got Fallen Crusader, you got Razor Ice, and dual wield actually pulls ahead of a two-hander when it comes to burst pressure and when it comes to sustained. So right now it's kind of an automatic choice to go with that during the pre-patch, which also supports what kind of spec we're playing. So now that we know what weapons we're using, let's go ahead and talk about talents. And I'm going to go ahead and explain why we're using those talents and why we're not using other ones. So as for improved Icy Touch, additional damage, mainly we're putting points into this just so we can get down to Icy Talons. We need the haste, we leech the haste, we get the haste. Haste is good, especially when we're using Unholy Presence, which is going to be our main presence, by the way, because being on a 0.5 second global cooldown allows us to burst so much harder in a very short window when using this build. It's actually a lot of damage. I'm talking, you've probably came up against DKs around that, you know, it just feels okay damage, and then all of a sudden you get hit by a DK and you get globaled in a couple seconds and you don't really know what's happening. This is kind of the culprit for what's actually blowing you up, is because, you know, 0.5 second global cooldowns. So anyways, talking about why we're going into the haste, obviously attack faster, you know, abilities faster, everything's good with that. So getting onto the other talents, we're going to be using 2 of Icy Reach just for the extra range on our Icy Touch, Chains, Howling Blast. You know, you really don't want somebody to be outside your range and not be able to hit them with a Chains of Ice, otherwise, you know, that could be kind of bad. As for the next talent, we're going to be putting 5 into Black Ice to increase your just overall frost damage. That's kind of a no-brainer. And we're going to be using Nerves of Cold Steel. Now, hit is very important when it comes to dual wield, and if you're PvEing, it's honestly most likely the most important stat if you're dual wielding in the entire game, which is kind of crazy. I do remember that from Wrath. I was a dual wield Mutilate rogue most of the time, so my hit rating had to be just like, you know, Tower City. So definitely go with that. And obviously, you want to increase your offhand damage because your offhand's going to hit every time while you're using a dual wield frost spec. We're going to be taking Lichborn for the self-heal. Now, obviously, you're going to want to create a macro for Lichborn to cast self-heal on yourself and just spam death coils into yourself. Now, you are going to want a couple glyphs if you are going to be running that. It's going to be glyphs of Death's Embrace, so you can refund 20 runic power when you use to heal, which is in turn going to allow you to shoot a lot more death coils into yourself if you've runic pooled and then healed. The other one you got to use is Glyph of the Dark Death, which increases damage and healing done by Death Coil by 15%. More damage, more healing, everything is kind of multiplicative there, so that's going to be great. Moving on to Annihilation. Now, this was one that you can drop off for something else, or you can keep it. Me personally, I said in the start of the video, I like to, this right here, I'm playing a very heavy crit spec. Now, this is going to increase your overall melee special abilities by 3%, which is what we're looking for. Now, if you were using a two-hander, you would definitely use this because it would not consume your diseases on the target when you use Obliterate. I'm not concerned with that because I'm not going to rely on Obliterate at all playing this build. Next up, we're going to be running Killing Machine. You need the Killing Machine procs. That's what's going to allow you to guarantee crit on Icing Touch, Howling Blast, Frost Strike, Essentially with this, you're going to want to download some kind of probably what is it, a weak aura to show you exactly when you're getting those procs. Is going to be important because right now there's no way to know unless you're actually watching, you know, the top right hand corner of your screen. So you're actually going to have to find a way to you know, show it to you. I'll go ahead and show you what I got set up for mine so you can see kind of what you got to do for that. It'll help out a lot. Next up, we're going to be taking Chill of the Grave, which Chains of Ice, Howling Blast, Runic Power Generation. Runic Power Generation is going to be extremely important currently for us, especially with this build, because we are aiming to absolutely just dump Runic Power on somebody as fast as we possibly can. Of course, we've got those, you know, the global cooldown reductions, so our Frost Strikes are going to be coming out, you know, every half a second on somebody's face, and they're going to be hitting for like 3.3k if you're critting with those. And of course, if you're running the talent Death Chill, which guarantees a critical strike, if you line up a proc with this, you're hitting somebody for like 7k in a second. That's literally a second. We're not talking one global cooldown, 7k. I don't know anything else or any other class that's really doing that, but that is gnarly damage right there. And of course, you can unload, you know, 2 or 3 more afterwards directly if you've capped up on Runic Power and you're using the Glyph for Frost Strike that reduces the Runic Power cost of it. Oh my gosh, we are talking about some gnarly nuke burst. That's how you blow up pretty much any class in like 3 seconds. Literally insane damage. But moving on. We got Endless Winter. You got to have Endless Winter. Increases your strength by 4%. Not really why you're taking it, but your Mind Freeze no longer costs Runic Power. That is going to be just amazing for you because you do not want to be caught with a kick without Runic Power. That just feels absolutely terrible. But if you are really good at managing your Runic Power, I suppose you could drop that off for something else, maybe a little more damage on the side, which would be fairly nice. But other than that, yeah. Alright, moving on to Glacial Rot. Diseased enemies take 20% more damage from your Icy Touch, Howling Blast, and Frost Strike. Obviously, we're relying heavily on Howling Blast and Frost Strike, so you have to take that to increase your damage with your dots on the enemy, so dots are going to be important there. We do want improved Icy Talons, obviously buffing our, you know, partners and increasing our haste by 5%. That's just going to increase our overall single target and how much damage we can deal to somebody. I mean, it's not really that great, but 20% to everyone else, I mean, come on, help out your teammates. It's going to be great. Alright, so next up we got Merciless Combat. Your Icy Touch, Howling Blast, Obliterate, and Frost Strike do an additional 12% damage when striking a target less than 35% health. Obviously, that's going to be how you finish people. It's going to make your Obliterates... I mean, we're not relying on Obliterates, but your Frost Strikes and your Howling Blast are going to hit quite a bit harder, which is nice, obviously, for executing people. Next up, I only put 1 into Chillblains. Obviously, this talent could go somewhere else, but my reasoning behind this is a lot of times I'm chasing people and they're just outside my range, but I don't want to waste a rune on hitting him with an Icy Chains. So I found a somewhat simple solution where my opener, when I apply Icy Touch, so I can get the haste proc from it, because you got to get the haste proc, guys, come on. It basically just auto slows the target, which feels really well and allows me to catch up to a lot of targets with a simple slow. And most people don't even realize that slows on them, so usually I catch up and they're kind of surprised by the fact that I just ran up to them. Next up, we got Hungry and Cold. Now, this one is an extremely powerful CC, especially in Altaric Valley, when you get like big team fights meeting each other in the mid, and you kind of just, you know, lob yourself down onto their healers and CC all their healers for 10 seconds. That's a 10-second CC, guys. 10 second. Just think about that. As long as nobody hits them, that is going to be the most insane push you've ever seen. I've used it in AV so many times in big team fights at this point. It is so enjoyable to use. Just try that out in the middle of them. They will get so mad, but you will get blown up. Next up, we got Thread of Thessarian, which is a dual-wielding talent, which obviously you're going to want to take. That way your Death Strikes, Obliterates, Plague Strikes, Runic Strikes, and Frost Strikes have a 100% chance to also do damage with your offhand weapon. It's going to be very important for us nuking something while we Runic dump on a target. Blood of the North increased Blood Strike and Frost Strike damage by 10%. Obviously, we're going to take that just for the Frost Strike damage. In addition, whenever you hit with a Blood Strike or Pestilence, there's a chance that the Blood Rune becomes a Death Rune. So obviously, you're going to want to use that later on. Convert those into Death Runes so you can use them on most likely Howling Blast stuff when it comes off cooldowns, which we'll get to that a little bit later. And we got Unbreakable Army. This is pretty much your Pillar of Frost. with a little bit of extra armor on the side, which obviously can't be bad. So you got to take that for your burst. I mean, you can't not burst with that. And the only downside really is it costs a rune, which usually you can kind of counter by hitting a blood tap directly after it. So, you pretty much end up with full runes even though you've popped cooldowns, which is very nice. Next up, we've got Frost Strike. Now, this is going to be your bread and butter for the majority of your burst, because Frost Strike absolutely hits extremely hard. It hits very hard. It is one of the hardest hitting, I'd say, melee burst abilities in the game, especially when it's fused with a 0.5 second global cooldown on abilities. So overall, you got to take that. And we've got Guile of Gorfind. It increases the critical strike damage bonus of your Frost Strike, Howling Blast, and Obliterate by 45%, and increases your duration of Icebound Fortitude by 6 seconds, which, Icebound Fortitude, immune to stuns, why wouldn't you take that? It lasts for 8 seconds. 8 seconds, that's a big boy avoid stun button, I'm just saying, guys. So anyways, the 45% damage increase on those on the critical strike, you're definitely going to be relying on that. As you can see as I'm standing here, I've got 32% in full PvP gear, which is quite a bit. If I'm standing around a big team fight, I mean, I'll probably push up close to like 40%, which means, a good third plus of my Frost Strikes are going to be critting. So next up, we got Tundra Stalker. Your spells and abilities deal 50% more damage to targets affected with Frost Fever. It also increases your expertise by 5%. So obviously, you're going to want to keep up your diseases on your target. Now with this, the way I'm playing, I am going to have to manually apply my diseases a lot of the times. Now, if you do want to take kind of an easy street on how you apply your diseases, you can use a glyph called Glyph of Disease, which causes your pestilence to reapply the diseases on your target, which means you could save runes instead of hitting, let's say, Icy Touch or Plague Strike again, and saving those for a Howling Blast, or you could even insert an Obliterate in there technically if you wanted to make that a bit easier. Now, that is something I'm actually looking forward to in the future a little bit, because that makes disease control very simple. And when it comes to blood, and what I'm using blood for currently is a mob farming in this dungeon that I'm just pumping out a ton of gold, trying to prep for the expansion, obviously. Anyway, going back to what we were talking about, Tundra Stalker, obviously you want that, increases overall damage. You're going to want to keep diseases on the target, because the majority of your abilities are really going to reflect on diseases, such as Death Strike doesn't heal you unless you have diseases on the target. You need diseases. And of course, Frost Strike, Howling Blast, Obliterate, I mean, it just increases your overall damage having diseases on the target. That pretty much applies for all 3 specs. So you're definitely going to want to get used to really managing your diseases. It's going to be important. Now, of course, at the end, we've got Howling Blast. Now, Howling Blast is just something I throw in big burst. You can throw up your Death Chill before. You can throw up your Unbreakable Army and Armor, and lay out a massive Howling Blast with a guaranteed crit, which is going to hit for like 3k. Now, normally single target, it's about the same as I'd say Frost Strike would be. But overall, it just gives you a nice way to pad meters a little bit. Maybe just do a massive AoE pressure on a big team, which is really nice. So you can't really argue with that. We kind of went into the glyphs that we're using. Obviously, Glyph of Frost Strike, Glyph of Dark Death. Now, these can be exchanged out if you don't want to rely on like your Lichborn to something else like Glyph of Disease. There are a few different things that are very nice. But overall, things you do want is Glyph of Raised Dead. Now, this would just make it so your ghoul doesn't need any dust to be raised, so you constantly have it, and you can just raise it up and sank it once you have 40 runic power. Very nice to have. After that, Glyph of Pestilence. I do like a large radius on my Pestilence, so I can spread that around, maybe do a little bit more damage, not necessarily kill anybody with it, but I mean, overall, it does help out. And that is about it for those glyphs. So we went over the talents for the Frost Tree. Now, the Blood Tree is kind of interesting. Butchery is what I like to take for a little bit more runic power. Now, obviously, if you're in a battleground setting, you're killing a lot of players, you are going to generate quite a bit of runic power if you are landing those killing blows. And, of course, it just gives you some passively, which is nice. Now, if I originally I was playing with Scent of Blood, so I was generating a little bit more runic power than that when you take direct damage, which is something I found very nice. But I wanted to be a little bit more aggressive and go full into crit, so I dropped a couple things off, went heavier into some of the crit things under Frost, and that's why I have so many talent points under Frost currently, because before I had it kind of spread out, but I really wanted to go aggressive with those crits. And currently I have nothing in the Unholy Tree. Now, there are a few things in the Unholy Tree that definitely catch my eye. Morbidity, so I can decrease the cooldown. Death and Decay is actually really strong. Death and Decay does a lot of damage currently. Obviously it's not going to be burst pressure, but overall it's very strong. Unholy Command, that would be amazing for like AV, honestly. If you were just like pulling the front line with that, with like the glyph that resets your death grip, you could constantly grip people across the border. Oh, that'd be good. Right across mid, you just boom, right into your team. You can just kill them. And of course we got Ravenous Dead here, which increases your total strength by 1%. Also a fairly good talent to use. Now, I've been very curious about Necrosis. I haven't done too much testing out about it, but it does rely on auto attacks. Your auto attacks are one of your highest damage when you're dual wielding, so I am kind of curious to see what dual wield would be like with that, if it would actually increase our burst pressure, which is something I'll probably look into very soon. But overall, that's kind of what we're running. In terms of gems or what you should be looking for, mainly just strength gems, a little bit of resil in there. You could put crit, because crit is also very good for us, but overall you will see better results in my opinion just running raw strength and resilience rating, just so you can stay alive a little bit, because the meta is currently, I mean, it's very strong. It's very bursty for the majority of classes, and that's also why we're using a very bursty meta ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you guys how to open on something and do a simple rotation. And of course, there's something else that's kind of very interesting in Battlegrounds. If you've noticed, whenever you spawn in Battlegrounds, you spawn with full runic powers. So you pretty much get a free runic dump at the beginning of each fight as you spawn, if you can get in combat quick enough. The other thing you need to remember is keep up your Horn of Winter. That is so much crit and so much strength. Like, that is just free. So obviously don't let that fall off. So let's go ahead and talk about what we're doing here. So if you just want to do kind of a basic rotation on something, what you'd want to do obviously is hit him with Icy Touch first. That's going to apply that little slow that I talked about. And then you're going to hit it with Plague Strike. That's applying both of your diseases. After that, you can either go into padding damage a little bit, but definitely try to keep your Howling Blast on cooldown as much as possible, because that is kind of like your Obliterate with this build, is what you're going to be relying on. Now, the other reason why it's good to do this is because Howling Blast is basically going to be guaranteed damage. They aren't going to dodge it, they aren't going to avoid it unless they have Cloak up. It's almost guaranteed to hit the target, and it is going to generate you quite a bit of runic power, just like Obliterate, because it does rely on 2 runes, which are Frost and Unholy. So let's go ahead and just kind of open up on these targets. I'm not going to burst this time around. I'll show you what that is in a moment. So those mobs were dying a little bit too fast for me to properly show the rotation, so I came over here to the training dummies to kind of show you guys exactly what we're doing here. So starting out, we're going to be Icy Touching the target to apply your dot to the target, and of course give yourself 20% haste. It's the first thing you want to do. Next up, you're going to hit Plague Strike to apply your other disease, and from there you're going to use a Howling Blast. Now you have kind of some options you could do. You could either save your runic power and go into use your Blood Strikes, or you can just kind of weave in your Frost Strikes whenever you've got enough runic power to apply quicker damage to the situation. So you've kind of got 2 decisions to make there. If there's a healer healing the target and you need more burst pressure to kill something in a Strangulate, definitely save up your runic power. But if not, just go ahead and weave the damage in there to do that. So kind of your priority for abilities is apply dots, Icy Touch, Plague Strike. Very important. Next up, I'd say your priority is Howling Blast. Next up, Icy Touch, and then Plague Strike again. And then from there, you'd go to Blood Strikes if nothing else is pressable at that point. All right, if pretty much if nothing else is pressable, that's when you relay to use your Blood Strikes. Other than that, it's pretty much rinse and repeat at that point. So we're going to use our Icy Touch. We're going to use our Plague Strike, and from here, since we do have runic power, we can use our Frost Strike, but go ahead and use Howling Blast instead. Just get that off cooldown and get your runic power, and from there, we're going to go ahead and start dumping our damage from Frost Strikes. And then it's rinse and repeat. You got nothing on cooldown, you can't use Frost Strikes, use your Blood Strikes. If not, From there, use the other abilities. It's actually a very simple rotation. It's very high paced and it's very quick. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to, but overall, once you're good at it, you're going to most likely enjoy it very much because there's a lot of damage that can come from it. And again, like I said, it's a very, very fast paced. But just try to keep your Howling Blast on cooldown as much as possible. Weave your Frost Strikes in whenever you can because that is going to be your biggest damage source. Now, when it comes to bursting on a target, remember what I said. We could either have a quick burst, which if you're running at a target and you want to throw up your cooldowns up front, you definitely can. You just follow the same rotation and weave in your Frost Strikes. But let's say you want to blow up a target in 3 seconds. Obviously, we got to teach you guys how to do that. We'll go ahead and throw in you know, a little bit of burst with Death Chill and Unbreakable Armor to show you guys how to do that. So, first thing, obviously, what you're going to want to do is throw up Unbreakable Armor before you burst, even if it's a quick burst, because it requires a rune. You might as well just get that out of the way. So you throw up Unbreakable Armor, you'd hit Blood Tap, you go bing bing, and of course you do want to be bursting when you apply those dots because it is going to deal a little bit more pressure. From there, once you've got a little bit of procs and generate a little bit of runic power, you're going to go ahead and throw up Death Chill. Now, I do have a proc here. As you can see, I've got this little Saiyan thing around me, so I can get a free crit here, rely on that ability from Death Chill, and get 2 guaranteed crits. That was 3 there, which was monstrous pressure. I mean, we're talking we probably put out 9k damage within a global and a half. That's almost the majority of somebody's health pool, like 70% of it. And then, of course, you just follow it up with a simple rotation. You can easily kill people in like 2 to 3 seconds if done correctly. And that's the other reason why we have such a big runic power pool, is because the more runic power I can gain, the more gnarly that burst is going to be in a very quick succession. So try to keep those on cooldown. If your Howling Blast ain't on cooldown, you know, spam the other abilities. And the other thing is we're also keeping up our diseases during this. It actually makes it fairly simple to keep your diseases up when you're not relying on Obliterate. So you're basically lining up your damage the best you can. You're throwing that in, and then you're just runic dumping on people for as much pressure and as much damage as you possibly can. Try to, of course, line that up with procs, but it's actually about it. It's pretty simple. Now, your melee damage obviously is going to be the highest with dual wield. You're going to be hitting a lot, followed by your Frost Strike damage, which you see 2.2k crit there. That's just the main hand damage, and the offhand is hitting for about 1400, which is about what is that, like 3600 Frost Strike. And if you times that by 4 or 5, you know, you're actually factoring in just about, you know, the person's entire health pool in you know, 5 or 6 half globals, which equivalates to about 3 seconds. So yeah, so killing people in about 3 seconds, definitely doable on a Frosty K if you do it correctly. Even geared people, and you know, I'll probably put some footage out of it very soon in action. But overall, I just want to kind of explain to you guys what I got going on. How should you be playing your Frosty K? I mean, there's obviously a lot of variations you can currently play, a lot of different ways to do it. This is kind of a aggressive crit build that I like to play. Now, if you do want a little bit more like mechanical support, like people are getting away from you, as I said, on Holy Command, and there's a couple other routes to go. If I was doing like Arena or something, I would definitely take those over that. But overall, that's going to sum up kind of the talent glyph guide build for Prepatch for you guys. I just wanted to go ahead and put this out so I can guess when people ask me, I can link it to them, because there really is no simple answer to why I'm playing this or why we're playing this. I just thought I'd just kind of put together a video for you guys and put it out there to see if you like it. So if you did like it, go ahead and like the video. Subscribe if you want more Frosty K content. Obviously, I'm going to try and put together some PvP videos with this. I'll show you guys what's up with it. I hope you will enjoy that in the future. So, of course, until next time, this was your boy Hazed.